Good morning. One of the great challenges about technology is somehow managing to communicate the utterly ineffable to the utterly oblivious. That is, that within the complex machinery of your computer or your phone or, I don't know, your microwave or toaster, there has to be some kind of mechanism to translate a problem to the user of this device, a user who is not familiar with the labyrinthine construct within the machinery. I use Adobe products for a lot of my production here at Point North Media. I use Adobe Audition to record all of my podcasts. And Adobe Audition has this wonderfully opaque way of informing you that something has gone wrong. I started the recording right now just before starting the live show, and it said, Adobe has identified a problem. That's it. No contextual information, no further clue, no nothing. That's it. Then you go into the menu with the audio preferences, into the hardware preferences menu to identify what the problem is. And next to my microphone, next to my speakers, next to all of the audio hardware that I have plugged in, it just says in parentheses, not working. Very helpful. Very helpful, Audition. Thanks so much for that. Very strong play. I've been thinking a lot about saturation and the effect of things upon our psyches. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Let's rewind a little bit. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to another week on Point North Media. I'm Alistair Stevens. I have my cup of coffee here. Thank you so much for joining me for this week in Point North Media. This week's going to be a great week. We've got a ton of stuff to discuss. A bit of a turning point here as we finish up our discussion of T.H. White's The Sword and the Stone and look ahead to next week's discussion of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Can you believe that has happened so quickly? I felt when we were concluding Goblet of Fire, I was skeptical about scheduling what felt at the time like so many extra podcasts between the end of Goblet of Fire and the beginning of Order of the Phoenix. Felt a little nervous about it. Felt like, well, maybe I'm just taking too long before I get to order. And now here we are. Like, it's happened immediately. So we're going to conclude with a great deal of rapidity. This is why I'm thinking about saturation so much this week. With a great deal of rapidity, we are going to power through T.H. White's The Sword and the Stone on Tuesday and then launch into Order of the Phoenix next week. And of course, we're about to read one of my favorite chapters in all of the Lord of the Rings. Like, I know that the story of There and Back Again has been every 2 weeks me saying, this is probably my favorite chapter in the entire book, though. That's a pretty good way to read a book, it turns out. But we are about to talk about something that I have been foreshadowing basically since the beginning of the novel. We're going to talk about the Steward and the King. We're going to talk about these two fantastic opposed scenes between Éowyn and Faramir, where we are going to talk about the heart of virtue and heroism and leadership and kingliness and all these good things. And then we get the enormous emotional catharsis of Aragorn being crowned, of the king returning, of peace coming over Middle-earth again. It's pretty fantastic. So this is where we're at. I know Karen's saying, oh my God, I need to start Order of the Phoenix reread. I know. And so Sunday pointing out, I know this is so great. Woo, only a few weeks until we get to talk about Luna. We are almost there, you guys. We are almost there. Luna is generally more well-regarded, I think, than my favorite characters. I suppose my favorite characters is slightly exaggerating the case. There are a set of characters, as you know, within the pages of Harry Potter, whom I have chosen to defend. I have elected to defend these characters because I believe that they are secretly fantastic characters. And in that canon, I will include Ginny Weasley, of course, Fleur Delacour. Who else is there? There's someone else too that I generally feel the need to defend against opposition. But I think that Luna Lovegood is generally more well recognized than those other characters, but still a weird and challenging tonal shift. The tonal shift at the beginning of Order of the Phoenix, which I have just been reading, is so powerful and so unprecedented and presented without any supporting framework whatsoever. I find the beginning of Order of the Phoenix to be, well, in many ways, I think the most interesting part of Order of the Phoenix, to be perfectly fair. I like this book. I like this book a great deal. You know, as I've said before, the only Harry Potter book that I don't really like is Half-Blood Prince. And I'm very much looking forward, with the new perspective that I've gained from moving through Harry Potter, I'm very much looking forward to learning about Half-Blood Prince and really kind of internalizing that book in a different way. But yeah, Luna is coming out. We're getting into serious. His past is so illuminating. Yes. So saying it's not one of my favorite books because I hate angry teen Harry and loathe Umbridge to the very core, but it has Luna and a great character work with the DA crew. Yeah, I think that Dolores Umbridge is a fantastic character. I hate her. I hate reading about her. But if we are going to be appreciative of J.K. Rowling's skill with characters whom we adore, then we should be at least as appreciative of her skill with characters whom we loathe. I think that Dolores. We're just on first name terms now because, hey, it's 2018, and aren't we all just a little bit on first name terms with Dolores Umbridge? Dolores Umbridge is utterly utterly vile, and is vile in a banal and prosaic way that even Vernon Dursley can't master. Even Vernon Dursley cannot rise to these apotheotic heights of banal middle-class British awfulness. It is genuinely terrible, like genuinely, as you can see right now, genuinely upsetting, as I'm sure you all know yourselves from your responses to the book, genuinely upsetting. So we have to admire J.K. Rowling's mastery, because there's no way that it wasn't intentional, right? She clearly set out to write a character who would provoke this response and did exactly that. Yeah, exactly, right? Karen is saying, agreed about Half-Blood Prince, but it's almost more interesting to discuss a book we don't love in the context of the whole series. I completely agree. I feel as though many of our most engaging discussions in the context of Dear Mr. Potter have been about stuff that we don't necessarily love, right? There's a lot to enjoy. Prisoner of Azkaban, in many ways, was the least satisfying part of Dear Mr. Potter so far, simply because Prisoner of Azkaban is so bloody good. It's just really, really good. And when something is good and polished and focused and tight, I may be exaggerating Prisoner of Azkaban's virtues there just a little bit, right? But when something is good, there oftentimes just isn't that much to say about it. We can analyze the ways in which it is good, but that gives you one answer. That gives you one focused and fixed answer. When you were talking about the ways in which something is bad or incomplete, or at least open to interpretation, open to ambiguity, open to speculation, then you have infinite avenues to explore. That has certainly been my response to Goblet, I think. I have, this is not to say that, you know, I've enjoyed talking about Goblet more than I enjoy talking about Prisoner of Azkaban. I'm just talking, you know, academically, literarily. I think that our discussion of Goblet has been more fruitful, perhaps, than our discussion of Prisoner. And certainly the discussion of Goblet of Fire has been anchored in this kind of speculation, where we have really looked past the text and looked past the plot and seen the mechanics and the structures of the world building that take us to this point. I now feel like I have a pretty good handle on why Goblet of Fire is a problematic book. Not problematic in the sense that it is problematic politically, though it certainly is that a little bit too, but problematic in the sense that the structure is misaligned, problematic in the sense that the lines of conflict are off, that the pacing is shot. I can see both why that is true and also how we got there, why it seemed like a good idea at the time to craft this book. I am certain that Goblet of Fire was never supposed to be the length that it is. It is a staggeringly long book, an unnecessarily long book. And if the book had been in line with the first three Harry Potter novels, then actually the structure of the Triwizard Tournament would have stood up to scrutiny. It would have maintained the pace coming through the entirety of the book. It doesn't. It is too flimsy a structure to span that immense chasm, that immense gulf from the first page to the last. This is the point at which we begin to see J.K. Rowling's reach exceed her grasp in terms of her world building, in terms of her storytelling. And that is all to the good, because I think that this generates some of the most interesting and propulsive stuff in Harry Potter. I don't think it's going too far to say that the last three books in the Harry Potter series are much more important, both in terms of the reader response and in terms of the cultural impact of Harry Potter as a whole. That the last three books, are more important than the first four. I think that's probably fair to say. Again, seeing Goblet as a transition is pretty interesting. Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. Jackie's saying, I didn't like Half-Blood Prince until I recently reread it, and now I like it. I am expecting that to be the case with me too, Jackie. I am absolutely waiting for that moment. I am waiting for that revelation. I am waiting for the formal apology that I will give at the beginning of that season of Dear Mr. Potter, the little mea culpa, where I say, I have talked some smack about Half-Blood Prince, but here we are. Yeah. Let's take a look at the calendar, shall we? For what started off as a pretty ramshackle show, this show is just getting more and more ramshackle every week. Let's take a look at this week on Point North. Let's take a look at our schedule. Of course, we're starting right now with the This Week on Point North session. Tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, we will take a look at Dune. We'll return to the pages of Dune. We will return to these pages of Dune. In fact, we're going to power through to the end of the first book of Dune. This is picking up from the second session in the patron-exclusive book club discussion for Dune last night. So I am thinking a lot about Dune, you guys. And Dune is, I feel like I am inhaling melange. I feel like I am inhaling the spice at this point, because Dune is clouding my senses in a really weird way. There is something about powering through this book so swiftly. To put this in context, read the first book of Dune yesterday. And again, some of you may not know that Dune is actually divided into 3 books. This is book in the Lord of the Rings sense, right? There's 3 books contained within a single volume. I read the first book yesterday and then listened to the audiobook version of the first book as I was going about and doing chores and prepping for the class last night. So I have basically been ultra exposed to Dune, both consciously and subconsciously over the course of the last 24 hours. And I am starting to feel it, you guys. I am starting to feel like a little spacey and a little disoriented. I am starting to feel like, I don't know, all of this philosophy seems to be moving something within me, which is, of course, entirely appropriate for Dune. It is crazy how powerful this is. And that was what got me thinking about saturation, I suppose, and about efficacy, I guess. The 2 most powerful ways of interacting with stories and storytelling, the ways of interacting with other human beings, the ways of interacting with human communication at all, is through this kind of this saturation, this surplus and surfeit of immersion into a fictional world, right? Where you sink into a single novel or a series or a movie series that you absolutely love, or a TV show, which I think we've all done now thanks to the age of Netflix. You sink into something and you immerse yourself in it, and it moves beneath the surface. There are changes which are wrought within you thanks to prolonged exposure to this very specific worldview, right? You start thinking differently. This is what stories do. Stories will imprint a new pattern upon your neurological structure, right? The transitional quality of the metaphor allows me to take a structure within my brain and place it within your brain. That's what we do with language. It's what we do with images. It's what we do with art. And it's certainly what we do with narrative. And when you are overexposed to things, you start thinking in those ways. If you've ever marathoned all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for example, you will start quipping like you are a Joss Whedon character. You will start thinking in those patterns. You will start getting those rhythms. If you start, if you marathon Parks and Rec, then you will, start internalizing that quietly absurdist and darkly nihilistic streak of humor that runs through the heart of that show, still kind of counteracted with that huge warmth. It will be called intention in exactly that way. If you have immersed yourself in the Lord of the Rings or the Harry Potter series, or the works of David Eddings, an author that I have been thinking a lot about over the course of the last couple of weeks, then you'll find yourself thinking in these terms. I have had this happen to me pretty constantly, in fact, because I'm just covering a lot of material right now, in fact. So I've had this happen to me with Dune over the course of the last 24 hours. I had this happen to me with T.H. White last week as I was reading the whole of The Sword and the Stone before producing the first discussion over at Dear Mr. Potter about it. And I'm thinking a lot, basically, about that culture and that climate, about being immersed, being suspended in this world. I think is really interesting. I don't have a conclusion to this thought, except to recognize the absolute importance, the critical importance of stories and storytelling and human communication and metaphor in general, right? Symbols and art and all of this is vitally important. It can change your brain. It can alter your mind. It can alter your, not the neurochemistry, I suppose, but the neural geography, the neural topology within your head, which I suppose the only conclusion that I can take from that is that we ought to be careful. We ought to be careful as individuals. We ought to be careful as members of a responsible society to moderate the degree to which we allow texts which are objectionable or problematic to be impressed upon us. We ought to hesitate before we allow ourselves, our identities, our personalities to be molded by exposure to art, which is innately problematic, right? And there is not a one-to-one correlation between a problematic piece of art and a problematic response to that piece of art. There is not a one-to-one correlation between an objectionable or outright provocative piece of art and an objectionable or outright provocative or provoked emotional response to that piece of art. It's nothing like that simple. Suffice it to say that if there is something that makes you feel uncomfortable, don't expose yourself to that thing. It is having a real effect on you. It is having a real consequence for you. And there is too much good stuff in the world to waste a moment on something that isn't good. That's true if you're not enjoying a book or a movie or a TV show or an album or whatever. It is all the more true if you are actually upset by the content of the thing that you're reading. Yeah. If you binge Parks and Rec, says Aaron, like me, you will, like me, seriously consider getting into woodworking. And Pete noting that growing up watching Blackadder and Fawlty Towers shaped a lot of my mannerisms of speech. Me too, Pete. Me too. There is a particular cadence, particularly Blackadder cadence. There is a particular cadence which I still think of. I still kind of fall back to. It is encoded at a very deep level that if you open the little manila file folder contained within my core, like not even within my mind, but within like the heart of who I am as a person, if you open the manila folder marked comedy, the first thing that you find is a page of dialogue from Blackadder with all of that peculiar Rowan Atkinson cadence in particular. Is yeah, absolutely. And Gretchen saying this is the sole reason I quit The Walking Dead, that feeling that a TV show was emotionally hurting me. Yes, I completely agree. That's well, that's not quite the reason I quit The Walking Dead, but it's very close to the reason I quit The Walking Dead. It is the reason that I quit Game of Thrones. It was just too much. Red Wedding, you guys. Red Wedding, end of season 3. I was out. I just thought, no, I'm done. And then curiously, as I mentioned a little last night, I have been rewatching Game of Thrones. I have powered past this. I am now halfway through season 4 and actually really enjoying it. I think Game of Thrones drastically benefits from being watched week to week, being watched in a binge format like this rather than being watched week to week. But while I was watching it this time, I got through the Red Wedding, got into the last episode of season 3, and stopped watching halfway through the episode. Just got distracted, wandered off. Came back to the episode a few days later because I decided that I absolutely had to. I decided that if I didn't return to that episode like right now, I am just out. I am not going to pick it up. And then when I decide to watch Game of Thrones 6 months from now, I'm going to have to go back to the beginning and go through the first 3 seasons again. When I came back to the episode, I realized I have not seen anything that is happening on screen. I dropped out at exactly the minute that I dropped out the first time I was watching Game of Thrones as season 3 aired in the first place. So apparently there's just something about the pacing of episode 310 that you need to beware of. Just power through that, get into season 4. It's all so much better. Yeah. Events in Game of Thrones will not get more cheerful, says Pete. No, I suspected that may be the case. It's a very, very good show. It's a very, very good show. It goes to a certain collection of tropes and cliches a little too freely and a little too often, but there is contained within Game of Thrones, any given episode of Game of Thrones, more subtlety, more complexity, more effervescence than I have seen, certainly in fantasy television, right? Like if you put this against any other fantasy show that has ever been made, it looks real good. But if you put it against any prestige drama that's been made, it plays. It really plays. This is, I think, what makes Game of Thrones so special, is that it is not a fantasy show. It is a show about politics, and it stands very well next to The Sopranos or to House of Cards or to other shows that are in distinct genres, I suppose, or in less distinct genres, I guess. Yeah. Okay, let me see. The treatment of Sansa made me drop out, says Glon said, yeah, no, I know. We're confirming that yeah, Aaron is saying this is close to why I consider stopping Twitter every day or so. Jackie's saying Twitter is hard. Facebook might be worse. I think Facebook might be worse. I had an idea actually for a Twitter bot, right? This is a thing that I want to create, and I'm actually thinking about this because making a Twitter bot is not that hard. It turns out a Twitter bot is a piece of automated software that posts automatically to Twitter. And what I wanted to do was make a bot for Twitter that just every half hour tweets, "Are you sure you want to be looking at Twitter?" And then you follow the Twitter bot. And then when you open the Twitter app on your phone and you scroll down, you get, oh, here's a message from my friend. Oh, here's a picture of a dog. Oh, here's a terrible bit of news about something that's happening in the world. Oh, and then here's a message saying, are you sure you want to be are you sure you want to be browsing Twitter? Are you sure you want to be on Twitter? And then you think, yes, I am. And you continue down. And then half an hour later in your timeline, that message will come up again. I think this is a genius idea. I think it will help stop that whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, good. All right, let's move on. I just realized that I started doing the whole calendar thing and then got distracted talking about saturation. And oh, okay, let's continue our distraction then, right? Saturation is one thing. Saturation is that slow, subtle, beneath the surface, subconscious alteration of the individual, of the personality, by exposure to narrative, by exposure to art in its broadest and most general sense. But I have also had a very familiar experience over the last 12 hours. Last night, I watched Zay Frank's Invocation for Beginnings. Let me just drop that link if I can drop that link. There we go. I will drop that link in the show notes here. There we go. You can go and check that out. This is a 3-minute video that was made by Zay Frank upon his return to his YouTube channel something like 6 years ago. It is the most powerful motivating speech that I have ever heard in my life. It is incredible. It is focused on creators and on artists and on individuals who are looking to make things, I suppose. It is incredibly powerful. I have seen it now, I don't know, 50, 70, 90, 100 times. I've no idea, honestly, how many times I've watched it. But every single time, it is like a cleaver. It is like a hot knife through butter. It cuts through the fog of my mind. It cuts through the confusion and the whirling maelstrom of sense and response, right? Which I think we're all in this saturated world in which we live. We are all, I think, a little disassociated from ourselves, disassociated from our core identities. A lot of the time we've blown out our identities into this halo of self and sense that encompasses us. And this is an enormously efficacious reminder of who we really are. It cuts through all of that crap for me and gets right to the core of what I want to do and why I want to do the thing that I do. It is incredibly powerful and stood in really interesting and stark contrast to that soft and subtle immersion and saturation of narrative. This is the tequila shot of metaphor, and it works beautifully for me. Okay. Let's carry on talking about, where are we here? Let's carry on talking about our progress for the week. I should say that Tuesday and Thursday this week, that is July the 10th and July the 12th, of course, Dear Mr. Potter and There and Back Again will be afternoon sessions this week. 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central on Tuesday, July the 10th for Dear Mr. Potter 61, The Once and Future King. 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central on Thursday, July the 12th for There and Back Again 69, The Steward and the King. Then on Friday night, also at 10 p.m. Eastern. Nope, that's wrong, actually, isn't it? No, that is right, because this is in, sorry, these are in Eastern time. The Eastern time, Central time thing will never not be confusing. I apologize for that. I may just have to move back out to the East Coast just to make this a little easier. At 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central on Friday evening, if you are signed up for the Globes Bard class, session 2 will take place, looking at the histories and Richard III. We had an absolute blast on Friday night looking at a very brief introduction to Shakespeare's life, basically Shakespeare up to 1590 to, kind of almost to the cusp of his success. Then we talked about some of his poetry. We talked about the sonnets. We talked about the advent of the Petrarchan sonnet in Renaissance Italy. And we talked about the development of the English Shakespearean sonnet and why it is just basically a more interesting poetic form, right? And Shakespeare's utter mastery of it. We looked at, I think, 7 different sonnets looking through his first quarto. And then we talked very, very briefly, because I absolutely ran out of time, as is my way. We talked very, very briefly about Venus and Adonis, his first published piece of work, in fact, his first published narrative poem, a really great poem with some very problematic sexual politics, but some gorgeous poetic construction. So all of that was last week. This week, we're going to be talking about politics in the Elizabethan period. We're going to be talking about the reality of London's theatre world in the Elizabethan period, which is going to be absolutely fascinating. We're going to talk about the histories and why Shakespeare, in his first period, in his sanguine period, turned most freely to histories and wrote most prolifically in the form of history. And then we're going to take the last half of the class and look at Richard III in some depth, the conclusion to the War of the Roses. Quadrilogy, I suppose, tetralogy. I don't know, what would a triptych be in 4 parts? I'm not sure, but a quadric. Yeah, let's say quartric. Why not? So that is that's the shape of the week. Let me see. Move to the West Coast if you have to pick one, says Aaron. Either way. Good. Yeah, and Pete's saying, hooray, UK accessible. Yes, that's basically what it came down to, you guys. It's been a long while since I've done a Euro-friendly live broadcast. So yeah, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central this week for Dear Mr. Potter on Tuesday, and for There and Back Again on Thursday. And Jackie's pointing out, moving from West to East next week. That's okay, Jackie. We can just switch. You can move out East and I'll move out West, and we'll just make the whole thing work, right? Yeah. I hope you have a wonderful time. I hope the move isn't too terrible for you, Jackie. I hope it's pretty painless. Let's see. I've got a question in the question bucket. Oh my gosh, Aaron asking, are you or anyone you know at CRR interested in the Gravity Falls complete series on Blu-ray? I accidentally pre-ordered twice, so I have an extra copy. Aaron, that is incredibly generous. Yes, I would love that. Gravity Falls is spectacular. I don't think I've talked about this on a podcast, in fact, but 2 weeks ago, I watched the back half of the second season of Gravity Falls and absolutely loved it. I had seen it before, but I was just in the mood for it. So I kind of scrolled through to the point when things get big, and then watched all the way through Weirdmageddon at the end of Gravity Falls. No spoilers for Gravity Falls if you guys haven't seen it. And then I absolutely insisted that my Excelsior co-host, Sarah Kate Pezant, sit down and watch the whole thing, which she did in 2 days. She devoured all of Gravity Falls in 2 days and absolutely loved it. Gravity Falls, I think she and I disagree slightly. I think she she likes Adventure Time slightly more than Gravity Falls. I like Adventure Time slightly less than Gravity Falls. We both agree that Steven Universe is still the best show on television right now. If you're looking at animated shows, Steven Universe is, oh boy, it is amazing. But Gravity Falls, for an animated show to do in 2 seasons what that show does, to tell an absolutely complete story, to take you from the first to the last, and to make it focused and complex and light and brilliant and also very weighty, very significant. I will just say that for those of you who have seen it, the sibling hug at the end of the penultimate episode is one of the greatest and most emotionally anchored moments in all of television. Gravity Falls is marketed for children. Of course it is, because that's how you market animation in this country, I guess. Don't sleep on Gravity Falls. It is incredibly smart. It is incredibly progressive. It is incredibly thoughtful. Go and watch this show and fall in love with it. As I say, 2 seasons. It's really not that much a commitment. It's just utterly, utterly wonderful. Thank you so much, Aaron. What a generous thought. Thank you so much. You guys, I think that's going to do it. Let's please rent my house, says Jackie. I would love to. I would love to. There's been a lot of talk around here about at least road tripping out west, right? I've never seen the Pacific Ocean. You guys, never seen it. I've never been further west in the United States than I am right now. In fact, Oklahoma City is the furthest west that I have ever been. I suppose, like, technically Yukon or Mustang, like out on the western fringes of the city. That's as far west as I have ever been. I want to push that boundary a little further. I want to continue my quest to see everything that this great country has to offer. Let's run through very quickly the breakdown for the week then. At 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central tonight, the patron-exclusive book club discussion on Dune. This is our third part. Oh, a quick note about the patron exclusives. I have taken all of the patron exclusive audio. Actually, that is not true. I have taken all of the book club patron exclusive audio from the Patreon page and put it in a Dropbox or in a Google Drive folder, and put the link to that up on the Point North Media forum, where I have been again for the first time in a while. Head on over to pointnorthmedia.com/forum. If you are a patron, let me know. I will give you access to the patron exclusive board there, and you'll be able to download in a very free and easy and convenient fashion. So far, all of the book club audio, I think there are like almost 30 episodes in there. Now I'm going to go back and add all of the pre-book club Point North patron exclusive Q&A content to that folder too. It's just going to take me a little bit of time because that's a lot of downloading and renaming and uploading and all of that stuff. So I will get to that. But right now, all of the book club stuff is there and is available. So if you are a patron of Point North Media and you don't want to go through the Patreon page, or you didn't pledge through the Patreon page, just let me know and I'll give you access to that over on the forum. But tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, the third session in our Dune discussion, taking us all the way through to the end of book 1 of Dune, entitled Dune. Always very complicated. Next week, we're going to launch into book 2 of Dune, titled Maudib, which I'm very excited for. Tomorrow, Tuesday, July the 10th, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, Dear Mr. Potter 61, The Once and Future King. On Wednesday, I'm going to try and get out the long-awaited Story in Star Wars episode that I have been working on, which, damn it, if the Star Wars fandom could just be cool for like a minute, I might be able to get this show finished. But the problem is that every time I write a version of this show and then take like a break, go make a cup of coffee before I go to record it, something else happens in the Star Wars fandom, and everything that I just said is completely out of date. So if Star Wars could just be chill for like a minute, then I'll be able to talk about how we should be Star Wars fans, how we should be fans of anything, how we should engage with the art and the narratives, which means so much to us, and how we should, as decent human beings, engage with other people, right? Not too big an ask, maybe. We're going to be talking about that, hopefully, on Wednesday. I'll do my level best to get that podcast episode out. Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, there I'm back again, 69, The Steward and the King. And then Friday, the second session of the Globes Bard class, Histories and Richard III. That is going to do it for this week. I urge you all to go and fire up the invocation by Zay Frank. Go find that link that I just posted, and you will have a great Monday. I'm sure that's how we'll make that work. Jackie's just telling me here in the chat. Tried to rewatch The Last Jedi. I had to turn it off. Help me. I will figure it out. I will bring you around. We will find a way to do this properly, right? We will find a way to talk about The Last Jedi. It doesn't have to be for everyone. It isn't, in fact, for everyone. And I think among people who are like real Star Wars fans, who haven't joined real Star Wars fans, I'm getting into a whole no true Scotsman argument, which is not a thing that I want to do. Among people who are still Star Wars fans, I suppose, fans of everything that Star Wars is, up to and including The Last Jedi, up to and including Solo, right? Of people who still like Star Wars, I think I'm actually a little cooler on The Last Jedi than most people. I think that within that movement, it is a very, very popular film. I like it just fine. I think it is a good, solid movie. it is probably my least favorite of the modern Star Wars movies, though even then I move back and forth on it so much. I really do. So we'll talk about it. Yeah. No gatekeeping, says Jackie. Absolutely right. Yeah, and Sosa Sundar is saying the loud minority of Star Wars fans that I know, I guess, think they somehow need to counter more actively in the fandom as a kind of propaganda. Yeah, and Pete says, I love about 80% of The Last Jedi. The other 20% is dubious, but it's fine. It's all fine. That is what I feel like. That is where I am with it, honestly. Yeah, and maybe even... No, 20% sounds about right. 20% sounds about right. I'm really looking forward to getting the opportunity to talk some more about Solo too. Yeah, that's next on my list. All right, guys, it's been a half hour. That's going to do it for us. I hope you all have a wonderful Monday. I hope that you are all able to join me for the Dune discussion tonight. It's not too late. If you head on over to patreon.com/pointnorthmedia, then you can pledge your support there and get access to, as I say, 30 episodes of book club discussion, Wrinkle in Time, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Good Omens. I feel like there's Murder on the Orient Express. Some other discussions, by the way. Oh, and I'll also say, because I am me, that I've already added an extra session to the Shakespeare class. At some point, either the last week of July or the first week of August, I'm going to throw a special live commentary party celebration for the 2010 adaptation of The Tempest. That is the Helen Mirren, Ben Whishaw version of The Tempest. It is, by all accounts, not a good film. I haven't seen it, but I have read some interesting things about the adaptation. The most interesting bit of adaptation, of course, gender flipping Prospero to Prospera and having that character be played by Helen Mirren. That's really interesting, and will give us a chance to talk about that. So we're going to do some kind of live commentary broadcast regarding that sometime last week of July, beginning of August, right after the rest of the Shakespeare class is over. That is going to do it. That will be a tempestuous time, says Aaron. And on that note, let's close it up, shall we? Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great Monday. Have a great week. I will talk to you all again very soon. Until then, take care.